Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com here. This week's episode of the Market Monday. So I'm not going to give too much away on this topic because I will having a guest on my channel. We're going to have Chris from Legendary Mana to come on, and we're going to talk more in detail about the ban and restrict announcement. So I'm going to try to keep myself from ranting too much because I do not like this decision. I am a person from a old like Dota 2 StarCraft background where I believe that game balances should be as minimal as possible and then let the equivalent of the free market kind of fix the problem. So if anyone remembers back during the good old StarCraft days or the early days of Dota, when they tried to balance characters or balance strategies, or in StarCraft the different Zerg or Protoss or Terran, they used to do like little minor fixes to see if that will fix the format. So that is something that I suggested with this format, was just start with Attune with Aether, and if they needed to do an emergency ban, then do an emergency ban. So I'm not the biggest fan of this announcement date, the schedule part of it. I think that the standard could be something that could be tinkered with. This is supposed to be a competitive format, and therefore I think that if they give people enough time, if they just announce, okay, we might be doing an emergency one, give it a week or 2 weeks to get some more data, then we can do so. I think that this is an overreaction, and I'll be talking about that more in the live stream at 10 Eastern Standard Time. That's 7 Pacific or 8 o'clock my time for the ban and restricted announcement. So anyway, what we do know is that Attune with Aether, Rogue Refiner, Rampaging Ferocidon, and Ramunap Ruins are banned. Again, if they were worried about Ramunap and Attune, I would suggest, or Ramunap Red and Energy, I would suggest is starting with Attune with Aether and starting with the Common Desert, just the Scorched Ruins or whatever it's called, the one that just does 1 damage when it comes in, and see if that was enough to kind of nerf down the decks. I think at that point, red would have to go into red-white and maybe put the Sheffet ruins in there, the Sheffet Desert, the one that allows you to give all your creatures, buff creatures, and then there's already some red-white strategies that are putting in the Servo Exhibition and a few other white cards to make it worthwhile. But anyway, these are the two biggies that get hit. Of course, the decks, I think that the Ramunap gets hit a lot worse than the Energy. Other than Energy, yeah, Attune and Rogue Refiner is a lot for those 3-color decks. I think 3-color Energy is pretty much not going to be functionable without the Rogue Refiner and the Attune. Rampaging Ferocidon is kind of the glue that holds together Ramunap at the moment and Ramunap Ruins, and both of those are now going to have to go over to a different strategy, and I think I've identified what that strategy is going to be. So anyway, for this Market Monday, I'm going to speculate on cards that could go up. I'm going to talk about the cards that I think could have a resurgence. So the first thing to do is look at the MTGO. So we're on paper. Paper's still going to be flooded with all of the going up and down of the new set. But however, if we start to see some of the movement, Heart of Khran is definitely moving, Torrential Gearhulk is moving, and the Anointed Processions is moving up. Those are the 3 big winners. The Angel of Invention as well is going up. Sometimes you have to be careful with the MTGO because they do have a curated card list, and we need to go check that out to see if these just got dropped, and that's the reason why they're going through the roof. The Scarab God and Torrential Gearhulk are already in a very established deck. If we click on the Scarab God or the Torrential Gearhulk here, we will see that it does see play in Standard in this Esper approach or this black-blue control, which is starting to get a lot of resurgence, and it just lost its 2 worst matchups, Ramunap and then Temur Energy. Both of them could be difficult for the black-blue, and so now this is pretty much unchecked. This is a deck that really preys on mid-range or token-based strategies, as it has access to sweepers in the sideboard now that can easily put in Yahini's Expertise or Bontu's Last Reckoning, and it still does have answers for all of the problematic cards in the format, and they could eventually use your cards against you with the Scarab God or just beat you down with a 5/6 flash. It's funny where I'm going to try to save the rants as much as possible. I think I'm going to go off tangent, but it's funny how they find Rampaging Ferocidon, a poorly designed card that crowds the design space, when we have these 2 monstrosities, where of course they always tend to give the runs that have blue in them, creature based. Let's think of like Master of Waves or Thassa from back in Theros, being the strongest of the set of the type. And that's how Torrential Gearhulk was above and beyond the strongest Gearhulk. It had the best body, it had flash, and it had probably the best ability out of all of the cards. So, and then same thing with the Scarab God. Both of these just seem very pushed to me. I think that if the Torrential Gearhulk would have been a 5/4, it would have been a lot more able to combat, because at that point you could have done the 4 Toughness Matters card with Grasp back when we still did have the, what was that, out of the Oath of Gatewatch. And then same thing with the Scarab God. If they would have actually made the activation 5 with the Scarab God, or a little bit higher, this wouldn't be quite the problem that we see right now with both of these being so pushed. But anyway, that's a rant for tonight. But this deck just has all the answers. We still have a lot of good draw spells in the format, like the Hieroglyphics Illumination or the Glimmer, and we also have the Search for Azcanta, which is a great way to filter through your deck and then you get card advantage later on. So I'm expecting this deck to be the big boss again. I think this is going to be the deck to beat. Is going to be the black-blue, and we'll see the U-white and black-blue kind of decide which one is better in the mirror-esque type decks. If you go into the black-white or the white-blue, you have cards like the Settle the Wreckage that could be really good against token-based strategies. You also have Fumigate that I think is going to be a very key card. And then you have the Approach the Second Suns, which is a very decent win con in the deck. So it'll decide if this is more of a 1-for-1 type format, or if it's a go wide format, which one I think will reign superior. I think both of them do have game against each other. I would give the nod actually to black-blue in the mirror later on, because I think they have the better slots, getting black, being able to just exile cards from their opponents to like duress, and then you also have just the Lost Legacy and Dispossessed type cards that can just rip out win cons from the U-White. So anyway, these are, I keep my eye on a lot of these cards. I think Search for Azcanta is actually still destined to go down, because it's still a little bit hyperinflated from just Modern. And Torrential Gearhulk, though, is going to have a resurgence. I would sell all of these cards, because there's just no point once they do spike up from this latest ban. Because what we're doing is we're going through like a forced rotation. Again, ranting aside, banning the 2 best decks is going to be basically a new standard format. It is the wild west. There are some established formats already, or established decks already that were able to compete in this Ramunap / Energy format, but it's going to leave it open to many other strategies that are going to look to fill the gap that Temur Energy and Ramunap provided. So anyway, so look at all, be keeping your eye on some of these rares, like the Bantu's Last Reckoning, like the Vraska's Contempts and Disallows, to see if there's any movement. So then in other standard base cards, the other strategy that I think, the Heart of Khorran. This is a deck that Ramunap was just better at doing the game plan of either this mono black aggro or going back over to Mardu vehicles. I think that both of them are going to be able to come back, because Ramunap was better at playing that game. It was better at playing the if we peter off, we have ways like Ramunap Ruins or Hazoret to just at least become shocks. And it also had the very aggressive Soulscar Mage into Earthshaker Kenra, into Rampaging Ferocidon, into Hazoret, those type of draws that Mono Black Aggro and Mardu vehicles just couldn't quite compete with. So this is the one that's currently using the Heart of Khorran. This is a pretty popular deck. You see it all the time. It's got some game to it. They have the Bantu's combo in the sideboard, so it's going to have some game versus the Go Ride, because Yahini Undying Partisan can sacrifice all of your creatures and then use a Bantu's Last Reckoning, and it gets indestructible. So the Bantu's Last Reckoning will not kill your Yahini, so you're going to get +1 counters from all. Oh no, this is only your creatures. So anyway, you use a Bantu's Last Reckoning, it kills all of your opponent's creatures. Yahini gets huge and swings in. You can also use Yahini to get a cheap Bone Picker, and a lot of your cards are renewable resources. You have the Dread Wanderer, and you also have, let's focus in here. Let me add some to this here, so you can see you have the Scrap Heap Scrounger and the Dead Wanderer that just keep coming back. The Ruin Raider acts as not only a way that can crew the Heart of Khorran. This particular deck doesn't use Heart of Khorran, but it is a 3/2 that then draws you cards right on the beginning of your end step because you most likely have attacked in with the creature. This one still uses the Glint Sleeve Siphoner, the Night Market Lookout, Vicious Conquistador. These slots, there are some cards that you can definitely, there's a new Pirate that might be interesting here for another 2/1. I think Night Market Lookout's probably just superior, and same with the Vicious Conquistador in that slot, but just a very, very quick deck that backs it up with some removal-based spells, some evasive vehicles, and that's basically the gist of the deck. So it also does have access to, it is into black, so it does have access to Lost Legacy and Dispossess, which I do think will be key cards in this new approach, or Anointed Processions, or maybe even Panharmonicon type format. All right, so there is that, and there's also the Mardu vehicles, the old school. Let's see if we can find a list of the Mardu vehicles. I'm trying to think of the, just look at Depala, see if Depala actually can pull up an old vehicles list here. So this could definitely come back, just the good old Mardu vehicles. It still has all of the pieces that's needed. We actually do get some interesting cards that do create some treasures early on that could go in these slots. We have the good old Scrap Heap Scrounger, Toolcraft Exemplar, and a Scrap Heap Scrounger or Heart of Cran into the Depala Veteran Motors. This type of strategy is still alive and well, and there's a lot of different ways you can do this. You can go into the Hazaret. You can borrow some cards from the Hazaret. The Raider that we just looked at can go in this particular strategy. And Unlicensed Disintegration is still one of the more premier cards in the set. Remember when this defined the meta? This was just very, very quick, especially when you go Toolcraft Exemplar and a Scrap Heap Scrounger into Unlicensed Disintegration. A lot of times that just finished off the game right there. Cut Ribbons is still a really, really good card in this. They still have access to a Braid for the artifact-based strategies, and they still have access to black if they do need to utilize a card that can rip out cards from the deck, like the Dispossess and the Lost Legacy. What I like about this deck too is it has access to play the Fumigate game later on, because you still have cards like the Scrap Heap Scrounger and cards like both of the vehicles that ignore Fumigate, and then you need to drop down a 1-drop, and then you can crew again and start attacking in. So the go wide strategies people keep talking about, we want to see Rivals tribes. This is the problem right there. I don't think it was really Temur Energy that was a problem, or Ramunap Red that was a problem. It's the looming threat of Fumigates, the looming threat of Hour of Devastations that are going to keep back that go wide strategy. Speaking of which, though, we do have like the Heroic Intervention that can combat Fumigate, but I think it's just too narrow at the moment, because there's still Yahini's expertise that gets around it, and there still is a few other Hour of Devastation just loses and they can't gain Indestructible. So there are some promising tribes that are coming out. There was a 5-0 finish for both black-white vampires as well as black or blue-green merfolk that both attack the board differently. The merfolk go a tempo route where they can bounce and counter and then establish early threats. The vampire do tend to go wide that then can get some card advantage off like the Twilight Prophet and just have a lot of cards that create 2-for-1 scenarios. Then we have, of course, the gift. The God Pharaoh's gift decks do get hurt a little more by the new Graveyard Hate card that came out of Rivals of Ixalan. However, I think that this has been my experience with playing God Pharaoh's gifts. If you bring in a lot of hate, then just the tempo, just the card advantage, just your regular old cards like this Angel of Invention, even if you have to hard cast it, is still a good card. The Champion of Wits, if you have to hard cast it, is still a good card. You might have access now to the Brainstorm Merfolk, still a really, really powerful card if you just cast the card and let it be. The God Pharaoh's Gift is still very well positioned. It's one of its best matchups was the Temur Energy, other than it did get a unfavorable game number 2. So I don't know where I'll be with my Marionette Master. A lot of people have been asking me if there's new tricks and tips for the Marionette Master deck. We'll look at it for sure. But the U-White Gift is still more of the boogeyman than a Brew of Mine. So Disallow, of course, gets more oomph as well, because it's going to go into those blue do nothing decks. And let's just go back over the metagame here and just look at the ones that are remaining. So both of these decks are going to be gone. The Sultai Pummeler as well, I don't think really is even, and same thing even at the red-green. Without Attune, these decks get very, very awkward. I think the regular Sultai Energy as well gets hurt. 4-color energy. Grixis midrange does not get hurt whatsoever. Here's another energy variant that is still alive and well, though. If you want to go value-based deck, here is one that could go up in value because you still have the Attune with the Aether, or the Aether Hub into the Glint Sleeve Siphoner. We still have access to Whirler Virtuoso, still have access to the card advantage that Gonti and Hostage Taker and all of these cards provide. So this is probably your go-to deck that is going to replace the Teamer value. And it might give us, it's just, the oomph is just not quite there. You don't have the Long Tusk Hub draw that can really force the Approach the Second Sons to put in a lot of the early removal and not just rely on their sweeper type format. Same thing with the black-blue control, and same thing with any sort of aggro deck. They need to really push through, and without that, it's a lot easier versus this deck because you can see it's not aggressive. The Glint Sleeve Siphoner is not going to put you on a clock where you need to really worry about it. Same thing the Whirler Virtuoso. This is trying to play that really grindy mid-range type deck. But you can see the Scarab God, Torrential Gearhulk, our cards, Hostage Taker. A lot of these cards are going to have a lot of overlap with the decks that are going to be out there. So Harness Lightning still alive and well, Abrade still alive and well. This is probably going to be I would assume is going to be one of the top tier decks out of the gate. And so looking for some price spikes for these. Gonti's kind of interesting. You don't know how many are going to be used now with a few other cards that come out. There's a lot of value-based cards that do come out of Rivals of Ixalan. A lot of cards rival. I keep your eye on Hostage Taker. I think it's pretty low at the moment. It still does have some room to fall down because it's still being opened up. But once Hostage Taker does find its bottom, I think it's a good time to invest in it because I think in this type of format, it's going to be a key card again. So we're going to have the Rock, Paper, Scissors, but in this time, instead of a very aggressive deck with Ramunap, we'll still have the mono black aggro, we'll still have Mardu, and I think a card like Hostage Taker is going to be key for those mid-range decks to compete those and still not spread them so wide that they just get blown out by the Fumigate approach decks. So going back to the we still have the Esper Approach the Second Sons. Yep, this is probably pretty similar of what the lists are going to run. They might be able to go down to just 2 colors now because Vraska's Contempt I don't think is going to be as big of an issue of splashing for or the Fatal Push, as if they do go into more of the go wide strategies where the format tries to attack with multiple creatures rather than just 1 or 2, then the Fatal Push and the Vraska's Contempt are going to be unnecessary. And so they can just rely on the Fumigate and the Settle the Wreckage, and that will be fine. I think that is going to be the deck going forward. It's just back to U-White or Black-Blue. So as you can see, though, there's not a lot of other stuff. We had this white-red deck that was trying to go the Ramunap route, and this didn't actually even run. It did run the Ramunap Ruins, but now maybe they can put the Path to Metal in here as a replacement for Ramunap Ruins because we do have Haste. We do have another Haste. A lot of the Haste cards do flip it over, and then you have that 2 damage per turn that you need to get into with the Path to Metal. But the Rampaging Ferocidon is a kind of a weird band. I agree it was pushed. They needed to make it like a 3/2 or not have Menace or something. This was just too many things on one card. However, it was one of those cards that was a necessary evil in the format because it punished the Gain Life decks. It was their only hope versus the Hidden Stockpile based decks. Speaking of which, Hidden Stockpile decks still look good. Those are the Anointed Procession based decks. And so those are, Vraska's could have a rebound. Let's just look at Hidden Stockpile real quick to see what's in the Hidden Stockpile type deck to see if there's anything worthwhile to, and unfortunately they just wiped a lot of the data on MTG Goldfish, so there's not a lot of lists that are showing up. So the cards that are still investable, this one's using Enjani. This one's kind of a funny deck. I've never seen a deck that's used. We only have one. This was a league just recently, though. Uses the Fumigate, Fatal Push, start to finish, Renegade map. Then we have the Legion's Landing, Hidden Stockpile, and the Procession combo. So all of these could have a resurgence. The Anointed Procession has been going down recently. This could get a reinflux of price or go back up just because it has so much of the demand is actually being eaten up by the EDH. So I think the Commander puts this at about a $5 card. I think that's where in standard rare from a first set that is very popular. That's where it hits it, is about $5. So this was a standard deck or standard that doubled it. And you can see that after this deck quit seeing a lot of play because it just gets murdered by Teamer, went down half its value from what standard is. But if the demand goes twice again, definitely Anointed Processions could go up to $10. Now, there's not a lot of time for these type of decks to increase in value. However, there still is the demand from the commander/EDH that is going to continue to outstretch or start eating up the supply, even with rotation here. So I do think this will get hit by rotation, just the woes. Every year it gets earlier and earlier, and without a Pro Tour, there's not anything to spotlight the standard cards. So I think vendors are going to start to have this mass exodus in the format of rotating cards, and then re-put their money back in cards that are not rotating, so rivals and just regular Ixalan. So you'll start to even see staples like Chandra start to go down, like very similar trajectory here. But this is one I think could go back up. This is actually even played in a few other decks here. We have an Anointed Procession deck that is running this in the, just the Eternalize deck that does get hurt a lot by the graveyard, the anti-graveyard based stuff, but this is still a deck that you could keep your eye on. You can start to see there's a lot of overlap in these decks. The Fumigates to settle the wreckage here, the Champion of Wits, I'm sure is going to go in plenty of different decks. These are all investable cards. Legion's Landing, if this continues to, where is Legion Landing at these days? $3 does seem pretty reasonable for a card with this or $4.50 does seem very reasonable for a card that is so powerful that could be defining. Goes in Vampires. I think it was a 4 of in the Vampire Tribal deck that came out. Let's see here. This was yesterday. There was a Vampire Tribal. You see that it is in these the white-red kind of aggro-based strategies. It's in the Anointed Procession-based decks. I think that Legion's Landing is a clear winner for cards that have to go up in value. As you can see, yep, it was in this one. Very, very good card for yep, it's going to be a key card, in my opinion, going forward. So I guess in closing, not too much to talk about in this one. Let's just look at the overall prices. So format staples, I think that we should see that Legion, let's see all the ones that are still left behind. Chandra could come back as a very, very format-defining card. However, I don't think that Chandra has enough room to go up. I think that it just lost 2 of the decks that it was good in, and people are going to have to kind of scramble to see what decks this would go in. Mardu is promising for Chandra. The white-red aggro is promising for Chandra, and I'm sure there could still be some other innovations with some decks that do run, like a red-blue pirate tempo deck could easily see play, and Chandra could go in that. Red spells still seems okay. We still have the archer that every time you cast a non-creature spell it does a damage. Those decks possibly could see resurgence because we still have cards like Opt. They might be good in this particular format. If we go over to the rest of these, though, Vraska's Contempt sees a lot of overlap with many, many decks. Settle the Wreckage does as well. The Vraska's Relic Seeker can definitely go in many different decks. The Fumigates and Cast Outs. Nissa was only an energy, so that one can go away. So Legion's Landing's right here. And the vast majority of these cards were energy. So Legion's Landing, this is telling that Legion's Landing can go up in value. Authority Console is another one you should definitely keep your eye on because it hoses those go wide strategies. And Haste is still going to be alive and well. Hazard is still going to be alive and well. They just have to adjust the way they do it. So for my picks for investing in cards, if you're worried about post-rotation, if you're worried about... I typically don't like first sets because they are just drafted into oblivion. And I like to focus on second sets. But I think that Legion's Landing is the card at $4.50 that has the most potential. It sees play in Modern. It does see even play, Commander does like it. It's a way to have a renewable resource in Commander. And I think that it's still to this day the second most powerful of the flip lands. I think Search is just a little bit better than Legion's Landing, but if you look at Search, it's a $10 card, and Legion's Landing is a $4.50. And I think the discrepancy within those is going to have to increase. You know, this is number 10 versus number down here into the 35s, but you could see the amount of decks that just do run Legion's Landing that I think are going to take off after this this forced rotation. So that's one of my cards that definitely you should keep an eye on. Hour of Devastation is another card, and Hour of Promise. Hour of Promise is interesting because it gets the if people do care about City's Blessing deck, it's a deck that definitely puts out City's Blessing because you get 4 lands and 2 zombies. As well as it stabilizes you quite well with those 2 zombies, ramps you up to a 7-drop. We might see some Hour of Devastation, so that's Hour of Promise, like Jund control decks that start to see play, and those are very, very low at the moment, the hours, both of them. Let's just look at the prices of Hour of Promise, which I think is pretty much, $1.10. This is definitely a card I think everyone should start getting into anyway because it sees a ton of play in Commander. And then let's just look at this set. I like these second sets. This is the set I think that has the most going for it. So Crescent Sunmare is definitely on power level for this now non-energy based meta. Nicol Bolas could absolutely see a resurgence from $8, but the problem with Nicol Bolas is it's usually in decks that even want it, a 1-2. I don't think Locust God is powerful still in the format enough. Samut is interesting because if we do have a red-green aggro shell, this one's actually not a bad card. Double strike on a creature. I found this card very powerful, actually. And one of the worst matchups when I was running Samut was both energy and Ramunap. The Samut was good against non-energy, non-Ramunap when I ran it in a deck. So we'll definitely take a look at it. Tournament of Hailfire absolutely could have a resurgence back in standard. I think all of this is from the commander is what's eaten up the low price of Tournament of Hailfire, because this is now the go-to finisher in commander. Bontu's Last Reckoning, still very, very low supply with this Hour of Devastation. Same thing with Champion Wits. These are both very, very highly played cards. Bontu's is going to be a key card if there is go-wide strategies. Nahab the Eternal, this is more, I still don't think this is something that is playable in standard that easily. Same thing with the Scorpion God. We have seen the Scorpion God seek play in commander from time to time, just as a 6/5 body that comes back, and it does have its ability to gain card advantage. If we do see a vampire deck, this could actually see play, or a Catcher's Monument type deck, because this is something that could refill your deck by killing those 1/1s. So if we go down here too, I don't think we got anything for Mills, so Mills out of the question. Scavenger Grounds, if the graveyard-based strategies become big, this could go up, but I think this is headed down because this was a key card in Ramunap, and there's no point to play deserts now in the red version because you're not sacrificing any deserts. So Scavenger Grounds is good because if you didn't need to exile graves, you could still do 2 damage to your opponent. A Braid could see a resurgence if it becomes a premium removal spell. There was plenty of new artifacts that look interesting in the Rivals of Ixalan, and I'm going to keep my eye on Majestic Myriarch, because this one is actually a card. If the Huatli tokens does take off, this card's insanely good in that. It gets huge, and if there's a way you can give it haste or lifelink or double strike, I've had a lot of just one shots with this Majestic Myriarch, and we'll try out a bunch of decks that I used to play around with to see how well they're positioned now in the meta. We'll be this entire week. We'll just be testing. I'll try to do some of those on live stream. And I'll do some without live as well. And the Hour of Promise, I do think, goes in a lot of decks. And keep your eye on the Endured Pouncer. We have the Eternalized deck. We have just any sort of aggressive deck that wants a card that can come back. I do still think this card is really, really powerful. So I'd focus on Aether Revolt. I'd focus on Hour of Devastation just for quick cards that could go up in value. There's still some goodies here. If you ever see these start to see any sort of play, rare-wise or mythic-wise, in the format, scoop them up, and you need to be looking for a quick sell though, because the rotation is coming very, very quick. You think that, oh, we're in January, rotations is 10 months off? That's a world away. In the scope of vendor time, it's not. You got to think of the time that it takes to acquire cards and sell cards at a reasonable rate. 10 months is nothing, and without having the Modern Pro Tour as a spotlight, I don't think there's a lot of room for these cards to go up. Other than this forced rotation will cause some activity in the market. So let me know in the comment section what you think is going to be the new Tier 1 deck, the new Boogeyman, and subsequently the card that is going to go up in value. My money is probably on the best non-rotating card is Legion's Landing. I think that Torrential Gearhulk is the biggest duck card that's going to go up in value. It's going to start seeing a lot of play in the format, and I think Fumigate too could have a huge price increase just because it's the best way we have of really shutting down those go-wide strategies. Again, though, I could be wrong. We could go down to just some Mardu, back to MarduVehicles.deck, and have that nonsense because those pieces are still there. I mean, Gideon being replaced for something like Chandra is perfectly acceptable, or just Gideon being replaced by Hazaret is perfectly acceptable, and there's still plenty of ways to get that deck. Oh, so speaking of which, yeah, keep an eye on Inspiring Statuary, or Expiring Vantage. That card, I think, has been very low lately, both online and in... so online it's $2, and it did see a price increase here, so people are definitely, that's going to of course be brewed, but it's as lowest it's ever been at $3.73. This is actually one of the more interesting cards because I think it sees the most play in Modern. I can't remember if it's the blue-red one. Let's just check it real quick. So let's look at format staples. Other one, again, we don't have a lot of data because I think it was just washed. So if we go over here to lands, see where Inspiring is compared to the other ones. So we have Scalding Tarn, Steam Vents, Blackcliff Cliffs. So Blackcliff Cliffs is the most used of the fast lands is what they call them. But this one was up here when burned. Yep, there it is. Inspiring Vantage is the 37th most played land. It sees play in a 4. So if you compare it to other cards that see as much play, we're in the unclaimed territory. Blinkmoth Nexus, Blooming Marsh. Okay, Blooming Marsh, but it's only at 2.5 in the Blooming Marsh. Yeah. So Inkmoth Nexus, we're in the range of a lot of these very staple cards. Sees more play than Sacred Foundry if you actually increase for the numbers. Sees more play than Hallowed Fountain, or sees about the same amount of play as Arid Mesa. And so you can follow the price trajectory of where Inspiring Vantage is going to go. So I think that's, if you don't have your Inspiring Vantages now, is probably a good time to get into them. The supply is very, very heavy for these base cards because I have a theory they were included more, and we always I see them being opened up like crazy in the standard showdown packs, and I'm thinking that this is Magic's way of stabilizing these type of prices. So I like Inspiring Vantage a lot because I do like red white at the moment, and I do like Mardu. I think that or the if it just goes into a white red variant, I think that both of those are very well positioned. So both the Spire Bluff and the white black land are going to be could have quick, not quite double ups, but could definitely go up 50% of their value for these new decks that are being brewed. Botanical Sanctum, get out of them. Other than Merfolk, nope. I guess Botanical Sanctum is probably fine then. But there's no point right now for blue red in standard, I believe. So I think that the blue red land is probably sell. Let's take a look. Where was it? It was right down. We had Spirebuff Canal. I think this is probably too inflated right now for standard. 8.4. And I saw play in All-Teamer Energy, and then, yep, that's it. So it wasn't seeing anything in the Grixis midrange, and I think it was one of the lower ones in the Grixis midrange, as this one didn't even, yeah, oh, no, it's a 4 of, so it does have that going for it. So anyway, though, I think that they'll start to stabilize in prices, like the Inspiring Vantage and the Concealed Courtyard should start to match the other ones. I think they'll all be around the $5 mark. So there's a good potential buy. But again, if you have any suggestions in the comment section of where you think the meta is headed, let me know. We'll be keeping a huge eye on this format. Keep in mind, I will have a special Market Monday for the Pro Tour coming up. So if you're worried about that not being me talking about the potential Pro Tour for Modern, no, we'll do that right before the Pro Tour Modern and talk about cards that I think are going to go up in value. But for now, I think that's enough of a topic. We've gone over our 30-minute mark for the Market Monday. This has been Kevin with RogueDeckbuilder.com. Thanks for watching.